Yeah. Ooh, Jenny, that's not going to be fun. Well, welcome everybody. It is Tuesday, November the 19th, 2024. It is week 10 of our course, and we are, it's moving quick. These courses, as you all know, because you've taken them before, they go quick, they move quick. I hope it's going well for you. And let me just sort of paint the overview of today's time, and then we can get started. So we have a guest, Dr. Bonnie Stewart is coming on around the bottom of the hour. She might be a few minutes late. That's okay. So we're gonna have either Andrea or Dustin do one of the content catalysts before she comes on, and then we'll have whoever else is left to do the second half. So that's kind of the overview plan of the evening. Curious to get any updates and progress on any of your work on your projects, just generally speaking. How are things going vis-a-vis your blogging and commenting? I will say this, my observations are telling me that many of you are very good at providing thoughtful conversations to your colleagues, which I so appreciate, because oftentimes that can be I guess all of it's compliance. I'm asking you to do it all, so it all kind of falls under there. However, it's not hard to tell that people are thinking through the way they're responding, and that's where the work comes in, right? Like taking the time to read somebody's ideas and trying to generate, and not having to, it doesn't seem like you're having to work as hard as I'm sure it is sometimes. I know it is, because it's hard for me sometimes to engage and think about how might I respond. But I just wanted to say that I'm generally pretty happy with the way all of you are engaging with one another, and I feel like that's kind of the bonus that you get from these experiences, that you do connect with another colleague from somewhere else that you didn't know, that you can have some kind of maintain some sort of connection beyond the course. But those are kind of my just sort of observations and thoughts as we're 2/3 the way through. Anybody else got any insights beyond that? I'm curious, even in terms of workflow and kind of, do you have kind of a cadence? I feel like there are people that have, I know kind of when they post, and it's sort of they've dedicated that time, and that's some good discipline to have. But yeah, just always like to hear from your perspective in terms of what's working, what's
I don't
not.
really feel like I'm commenting on maybe everybody equally, because some posts maybe hit closer to home than others, or just connect easier with some. So it's easier to comment on some than others. So that's one thing I've noticed. I was trying to spread it out, but then I was like, no, I just want to be.
And that's a good awareness to have, even like you're just saying, I got something. And again, I'm going to give you, I mean, that may be part of your summary of learning. I don't know, not necessarily, but I am going to create a form for you that I'll share with you probably next week, for you to sort of do your a bit of a self-assessment around that sort of participation aspect of the course. So yeah. Also, just because every day, all day, I talk about AI, and I think about it a lot, and I was with teachers today working on. I'd love to hear just really quickly people's perspectives on how the use of AI has either helped them, not helped them, not been a factor. Just curious.
I started a whole unit with my Christian ethics class about AI, and I've been using basically the common sense modules that you can find on there. I think some kind of hit home with them, others took a lot more convincing of like, you should use this, but I need to teach you how to use it. So I've actually just, because I was at home today, I made an assignment this morning for my EAL class and my volleyball class, so that they can use it but in a guided way. So it'll say, prompt ChatGPT with this, write down what it says. Is that something that's answering your question? And it has like a bunch of reflection questions. So today it worked really well. I'm going to have to talk to them if I get to work tomorrow about how they thought it went. But the main thing I'm finding with kids is that they don't know how to use it and they only think it's cheating. So then they veer away from it, honestly, or unless they're in a panic, they use it.
Yeah, and that's what even a slide I used today kind of reiterates that, is that students, well, they're worried. There's a large percentage of students are worried that, and it's a good worry to have, that AI is going to rob them of skills they need to learn. So I think I love that kind of lens that says I'm concerned about that, but I also like what you're saying, Alicia, that but if you understand how to use it, you don't have to rob yourself of those skills, right? You're going to have to develop new skills that you didn't have before. Listen, and people referenced it here. When the internet came, people were all up in arms. The internet's gonna, that's it, we're done kind of learning. And it's like, no, but think of all the skills that we've had to learn as a result of the internet that we didn't have, just our lens that hopefully, where information comes from, what's this source? How do you tell what a URL leads you to? All those things. Those aren't things that most of us really thought of before. So thanks. Anybody else?
I know I've used it in my kindergarten class, like I said last week, to do scavenger hunts or things like that, but also to help write lessons because I've been teaching kindergarten forever. And so, you use the same lessons over and over again. And sometimes as a teacher, you get bored with them. So like right now, my kindergartens are learning about the seasons. So I put in, give me some kindergarten lessons about the seasons, and it gave me some ideas. And then I was able to be like, oh, well, I could pull this information from here and just update some of the things I already use.
I've been using it personally to make all of my tournament schedules for my kids' hockey tournaments and at work for IEP goals, but I think I mentioned that before.
I'm stealing that. That's a great idea. AI's taken over my social conversations, so I don't know if that's a good thing or not. My family's sick of hearing about it. As an administrator, I'm using it a lot to help me with parent communication, and it is saving me, I'm not, like hours, because there's times I'm sending a tough email or I have to call a difficult parent, and I usually write myself a phone script, and I would agonize over the details or how I'm wording something. This is honest. I don't even know how to describe it. It's like I've taken or added years back to my life, maybe.
You've hired this free assistant to help you with a lot of stuff. Yeah. And listen, I think too, in the end, kind of the messages that I'm telling people is like, I know that those of you that are finding those successes are genuinely interested in helping your colleagues, saying like, listen, it could save you time. Every teacher in here, time, well-being, all that stuff's a big deal, right? Like we're trying to wrap our head around the whole workplace wellness thing. And again, I don't want to overhype it. It's going to do everything. But I mean, Miranda, you kind of overhyped it a little bit, like, but rightly so, right? You're telling you like, this is my experience. It's actually made a huge difference, which is awesome. But beyond that, again, I'm just trying to encourage people, like whether you use it or not, that's not as important to me as you understand what is actually happening in the world around us, both in good ways and bad ways. Like it's happening to us. And so to not be aware and mindful of it and not have some understanding of actually what's happening, that's where I think we fail as an education institution if we're not willing to engage our students. And we have a lot of teachers who their fear is that, it's like everything else. If you're afraid of something, you're just not going to, you're going to have you're not going to use it. You're not going to understand it. I played, I don't know if you're familiar with this new movie that's coming out with Tom Hanks and Robin Wright I think it's called Here. It's kind of this, I don't even know exactly the whole movie. I've just seen the trailer. It looks really cool. But the producer said that 3 years ago, they would not have been able to make that movie the way they made it using all the AI tools. And the quote was, and they're saying it's very clear in Hollywood, and which would represent a lot of people, is that those who have not explored it are fearing that it's going to rob them of their craft, their art. It's going to destroy art. But those who have invested the time to learn how to use it are seeing endless possibilities around creativity and how it can really enhance storytelling. So you've got those sort of, dualities of perspective, which is true for everybody. Like when you're less ignorant, you're just more, again, you're open to say, it might not be great, but there's actually some really practical things. So I just believe that we need to overcome all of those fears and unknowns. Like, let's make it known. Let's talk about it. So I think the shares that you all just gave me now are those really personal shares that I think are helpful for colleagues rather than, somebody like me or whoever comes in and tries to tell. Like, I'm like, tomorrow I got to talk to Prince George high school teachers doing a webinar, and I always just feel like who's this chucklehead coming in to tell us about AI? And I was like, I'm not here to hype it. I don't sell it. I don't make any money selling it. In fact, I want you to be very cautious, but I do want you to be curious about it. So anyway, we can continue this because I love it. But I do want to make sure that we get in one of our content catalysts before. And again, I don't want whoever, Dustin or Andrea, you don't have to rush, so don't feel like I'm take as much time. If Bonnie comes in, she can just come till we're done. So take your normal 15-20 minutes, whatever you're planning to do. So who's up, Dustin or Andrea?
I can start if you want, Dustin.
Okay. And I'll make you co-host. You can do all the stuff that you need to do.
Okay. Let's see. Oops. My reading was Empowering the Future Digital Literacy for the Next Generation. And they talked about why digital literacy, and they talked about the importance of how it helps to enhance critical thinking and creativity and problem solving with our students, as well as it teaches online safety and responsible behavior and prepares students for modern careers, because more and more of our careers include technology, and if students aren't being taught how to use it, they're going to get lost. So some key skills in digital literacy: there's technical skills like coding and programming. I know that our division, we have people that will come out to our schools and they'll do some coding and programming with the students, especially because I'm rural. We get it every once in a while, which is nice. Critical thinking and media literacy. There's cybersecurity and data analysis. Digital literacy beyond the classroom. You can do community projects, parental support, public libraries, could be tech hubs, encourage digital citizenship and lifelong learning. Community projects, that could be like having different community members come in and students could teach them about technology. It could be going out into the community and teaching others. I know a friend of mine in her community, they set up at the library and people could bring in their computers, their phones, whatever, and students were teaching them how to use them. They were helping fix them, all that kind of stuff. They had people that were sewing. So if you had sewing, like hemming that needed to be done, they were doing that. So it was kind of just a community building thing as well. Some challenges: that access inequality. So how are we going to ensure that all of our students have devices, whether it's at home or when they're out of the school? So coming up with creative ways to fund that. Maybe it could be ensuring that the library has enough devices so that there is that community hub. Keeping up with tech. So not only ensuring that our technology is current and can allow us to use the most current programs out there, but also making sure that our teachers are trained and that we've got some community partnership. So the impact on the next generation. It helps to inform our students who will be the citizens and help them to become innovative thinkers, empowered, responsible digital participants. So for my breakout groups, I did this, it's kind of like a Jamboard, but it's like a new version of it. I don't know how well it'll work, but I'm hoping it works well. But I have 4 questions. When you go in there, whatever group you are, it says the group at the top, and they're all colored differently. And then underneath each question, you'll find your color sticky note and just write your ideas on that one as a group. So the questions are, what types of workshops could students organize to engage families and the community in digital literacy education? What areas of digital literacy do you see being used by students as part of their lifelong learning? How as educators can we foster a culture of lifelong learning in our students around digital literacy that will extend beyond the classroom? And could a school community council help in fostering this culture? How would they be able to do this? What resources, speakers could they bring in? And all the questions are on the document as well. I will just put this into the chat. And I'll break us out into 4 rooms and give us, we'll say like 8 minutes. Then we'll come back and we can chat a bit about that. There we go.
A couple things to note when
Yep.
when you're done, you just click close the room and that gives them 60 seconds.
Okay.
Now I did notice that you had to sign up, but I mean, it took me 2 seconds just using a Google account.
Oh, okay.
But you may want to, I don't know, go into the rooms and just let them know that maybe only one person needs to
Okay.
do it or whatever. But anyway, that's all good. All right,
Sounds good.
I gotta just step out for a second, but
Sounds good. Okay, so I will just share my screen again. And then if anybody would like to share what they had put up on their group, that would be lovely. So maybe we'll start with the first question. What types of workshops could students organize to engage families and community in digital literacy education? Does anybody want to share what they had there?
I can share.
Sure.
So we had a couple of different ideas. Kelsey had an idea. They do a STEM night at their school, and so part of the T could be digital citizenship education, finding things, reliable information online, a student online conduct, student safety and privacy, etc. I know our school's just switched over to EDSB, so maybe at learning celebrations, they could do digital portfolio reviews. Another school I worked at had robot fights. I don't know. I think that would be cool. They programmed them and then they fought and it was a big deal. And then our school also does Better Together community initiatives where we spend time with the seniors at the senior center once a month. And maybe we could troubleshoot technology with them. Because I know when I go to my grandma's house, she's always like, these things aren't working on my phone. And then I help her and it makes her whole day. So those were some of our ideas.
I love that. Did anybody else have anything they would like to share? Okay. What about what areas of digital literacy do you see being used by students as part of their lifelong learning? See, we've got critical thinking, moral use, open conversations about AI.
Yeah, that was us. Basically just wanted to be like an open conversation, because a lot of the time, like I said earlier, kids are using it to just get answers of online. And so like if I speak in terms of ChatGPT, keeping that critical thinking skill going and thinking about using it properly and keeping an open conversation. I actually told everyone in my advisory class that if they ever have an issue where they think they're cheating on something, to give me what they're doing so that I can help guide them a little bit better. So just having that contact point with someone that they can trust helps a lot.
I like that. Yeah. The next one, how can educators help foster a culture of lifelong learning with students that extends beyond the classroom? I like the real world connections. Kind of the same thing. The last one, the school community council. Does anybody want to share what they had for that?
We've had a lady come in, her name's Val Caldwell. She's talked about like online safety to both the teens at our high school and to parents, and just, you know, bits and pieces about Snapchat or whatever apps are relevant at the time. Sometimes I think it maybe puts a little bit more fear into people than they had before, but also good to learn about those things and to be able to have a conversation. Our SEC also purchases subscriptions to some learning apps.
Nice. Okay. I am going to say thank you guys for watching my presentation, and yeah, I thought that like that version of Jamboard, it's a little more tricky to use than Jamboard, but I think it's because I'm just learning it. But they had quite a few different versions of it that, yeah, you could use at a staff meeting if you were brainstorming. You could send people in groups or whatever. So there you go.
Thank you, Andrea. I've been looking for a proper alternative to Jamboard. Yeah, like I used Padlet the other day, which it's good but doesn't do exactly the same thing. So it was good to even get that launched. Well, Bonnie Stewart, Dr. Bonnie Stewart is in the house. Are you at your house? I think you are at your house.
Hi, Dean. I am at my house, actually. I made it back, and I too have been looking for an alternative to Jamboard, so I came in kind of at an interesting time. So hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, very excited. And I didn't tell them this, but so you're getting a bit of a twofer in that this week Bonnie is going to share and give her perspective, and then next week her partner Dave is going to share, and then we're going to vote on who's the best, and it's going to be Bonnie.
Thanks, Dean.
So
it's always fun to pile on Dave. That's
just a fun sport all on its own. Yeah. Anyway, and I'll definitely see some banter with him next week, and I'm sure he'll come in with guns a-blazing on me as well. So I'm getting ready.
You tend to go at each other a little bit.
I know. I don't know where that came from. It just happens naturally, so I just go with it.
Dave has little brother energy.
Okay, well, and I'm a little brother too, so that's two little brothers.
That might be it
here, so that could be the problem here. So Bonnie is someone who, like a lot of the people, you find them online and you think, well, this is a really interesting person. And then you continue to connect with them. And then, sometimes you get fortunate enough to go visit them um, when they're in different parts of the world. So Bonnie comes to us today from Windsor, Ontario, where she now is working at the University of Windsor. However, the first time I met Bonnie was in Prince Edward Island, which is where she was born and raised. And get this, this is my favorite Bonnie Stewart fun fact. For I don't know how many years, she played the role of Diana in the Anna Green Gables Spectacular. So I always think of her as Diana. At the same time, whenever he told me that story.
I was a low. Are any of you familiar with Anna Green Gables, the story? I was the low rent Diana, so I was not on like the main stage in Charlottetown or anything. This is the 80s. There is a little house that inspired Lucy Maud Montgomery to write the story of Anne of Green Gables. Her aunt and uncle lived there. It's a fictional story, but Parks Canada has owned it since the 30s, and they used to pay me $4 an hour in the late 80s when I was a teenager to dress up in a variety of hand-me-downs from the main stage actual musical of Anne of Green Gables. So I actually played Diana, Dean, but I also played Marilla and occasionally Gilbert.
Okay.
All
right.
in layers. We would take tourists on a walk through the woods. I would be gradually getting rid of various layers so we could do our next scene. It was very dignified, and yes, there was not a lot of summer jobs in Prince Edward Island in my childhood that didn't involve Anne if you didn't speak French.
Right. Anyway,
I should have learned French.
lovely. And I know she goes back to his family there, so it's obviously near and dear to her heart. But beyond that, again, as I said, interesting. Bonnie is somebody that pushes thinking, and she really challenges us. Now, I don't know 100% what she's going to share with us today, which is kind of the fun part. It's a bit of a surprise. But what I do know about both Dave and Bonnie is that they come to all of these digital spaces with a pretty critical lens, right? They're trying to sort of look and see what works and what doesn't work, and how we might think differently. So in the end, you're going to hear a wonderful perspective that I know will challenge all of our thinkings, and at the same time, I know she teaches folks like yourselves, grad classes, pre-service teachers, in a lot of the same things that I teach, but she just does it more full-time and in the way that only she can do it. So Bonnie, I'll make you co-host, so you can do whatever you like at that point. And yeah, it's all you. And by the way, I just want to apologize. Right now, I haven't eaten all day, so I went down and got some room service. So I'm going to be eating. And so I'll keep my camera on, but it'll be, just don't look at me. Anyway, yeah. Bonnie, it's you.
It's all good, Dean. It's all good. And I'm just kind of parachuting in here. So I'm happy to meet you all. I know you're a grad class. I'm just kind of getting a sense of who's here and looking through the names and some of the faces. And I'm just going to open the chat for my own purposes. If you folks don't mind, would you just kind of throw in the chat where you're located and maybe what you like do? Like I know probably a lot of you are educators, but is that cool? Just kind of to give me a sense of Swift Current, EAL, Moose Jaw, Learning Facilitator, Saskatoon, ELA, Financial Literacy. Shaunavon, am I saying that right? Shaunavon, Moose Jaw, Mooseman. Okay. Thank you. This is so great. This just kind of helps me get a sense. So very much Saskatoon, or forgive me, very much Saskatchewan based, pardon me. My eyes landed on Saskatoon at the same time. I don't mean to make a city a whole province. Philippines, but now in Regina. Okay, so and also some folks, customer service specialist, etc. So not everybody is necessarily directly in education, but doing some education focused things. That's helpful to me. The starting conversation on Jamboard gives me a sense that a lot of you are probably thinking about tools to use with educators. I'm actually, I teach pre-service teachers primarily as part of my role at University of Windsor, but I'm on sabbatical this year, so I'm not teaching. And it's a really interesting year not to be teaching, particularly when digital technologies have been my core kind of locus of what I've taught for the last decade or so. So I used to do a ton of like Twitter-based teaching and that type of thing, but I've really moved what I do and limited some of the public tools that I use, and found that over the last few years I was relying a lot on things like Jamboard. And then I think it was last January 1st, it went away. And I've used Padlet for years, but it requires my students to like often log in or different affordances. And yeah, so it was just kind of a totally different thing. And that's one of the things about working in digital technologies, is that the affordances are always changing. I used to go in to teach teachers kind of, here is a tool parade of fun tools that you can use with your students. And I teach full year courses. By March, some of them would be obsolete. They wouldn't exist anymore, or they'd be freemium models that suddenly the students had been able to use them, but they were now charging them for them. So what I've done in a lot of my courses, and it may be part of what you're doing here, is sort of focused more on critically analyzing, not to like pick holes in, but rather to understand the big picture of what it means to use digital tools. And that in itself is changing so quickly that that was kind of what I had said to Dean I would probably talk about a little bit today. But before I blah, blah, blah too much, can I ask you folks a couple more questions? Like, I just kind of want to get a sense of where you're at. Did anybody here, you can use the chat, I guess it's probably easier than the raised hand feature, but as you wish, I can see some of you. Can you let me know how many of you did used to use Twitter or do use X, which used to be Twitter? What's the general vibe? Used to? Jenny, okay. Used to, yeah, a lot of used to. Never, used to. Okay. Can you share, but not too much, use still, great. Those of you who are putting in used to, can you let me know again in the chat, or feel free to take the microphone. Okay, only used it for the Tragically Hip final concert. Ah, nice. What changed your practice? Those of you who used to use it, if you're willing to tell me in the chat why you changed. Elon is answer number one. If you've never used it, was it just something that you didn't think you were interested in? If you're still using it, how are you enjoying it? Kind of at this point, I'm curious. Don't love the politics, too negative for me. Yeah, never got hooked on it. Fair enough. Didn't engage me, no idea, just stopped kind of clicking. The platform doesn't, totally fair that the platform doesn't interest. I moved into a new role. Yeah. Yeah, I used to use Twitter to connect with other classrooms and run like Twitter chats with other educators who were based in like Egypt and Ireland. We would have our students read shared articles and then discuss them using a hashtag that we created just for the experience. So it was really great. It was very participatory and all of those things. But I kind of pulled back about 5 years ago when it started to seem less and less safe. There were more and more dog piles on Twitter occurring. And in the last year, I have stopped using it myself, even though I actually did my PhD on Twitter. So I was an early adopter. I used it a lot. I loved it. And I did it on Twitter as a subject, right? I looked at academic Twitter and how it was used by educators, but I also had a not great experience in my PhD, and it was my Twitter network that kind of got me through it. So it was also really important to me as a community, but it's been a shifting kind of practice. I was going to share with you folks, if this is okay, just sort of like a short piece of how EdTech is changing presentation, but I don't want to talk at you the whole time. So I'm just going to do like a little mini version of this, and then maybe we'll stop and just kind of talk. Is that okay? Is that cool? All right. I will share. Actually, I got to open the right. Hold on. I am. Okay. Sorry, my computer is having delays. We had what I think was actually a cyber attack last night that my university has not exactly wanted to talk about. But everything had to be sort of turned off, and we're in the process of sorting it back out. So I'm going to share my screen, and there we go. I think that should work. Are you seeing something that says 5,000-foot view? Boom. Excellent. Okay. And I might as well make that full screen. So very quickly, because I was looking at Twitter as sort of the site of my PhD, really what I was looking at was networks. And to go quickly through what that digital scholarship academic Twitter stuff really was from my perspective, I was looking at, I did my master's in the late 90s, and I was not super techie at all, but I was really interested in how the technologies of a given time kind of can shape what it means to know in that time. And the early internet was fascinating to me, but it was still very much a space where it was exciting that that Encyclopedia Britannica had been put online, right? And a lot of my master's research was still actually library based. There was not a lot that was online for me to work with, but there were places where people were starting to kind of contribute to the web. And that idea, how many of you have heard of Web 2.0? Does that, right? So it's it's a peak 2005, 2006 term. Dean has heard of it for sure. And it was that idea that rather than just putting content online that had already gone through a gatekeeping process and somebody stamped it and said, Encyclopedia Britannica says this is good. It's more that Wikipedia idea where you can contribute to something. You're consuming ideas off of the web, but you can also contribute to the web. That was the core of a lot of my work as an educator, right? Was, hey, students, I think it's really important that your ideas matter. And there was a pedagogy that kind of went with that of you can be part of contributing to your classmates' learning by putting stuff on the web. Basically, this is one of my favorite slides. The internet was fun at that point, and I wanted to bring my students into the idea that it was fun, but also that they could contribute to stuff. It was an idea called participatory culture at its theoretical level, but really it was just not in the same stage of spiral of collapse that things are in at this delightful point in our shared present. So in those windows from 2007 to 2014, like blogs and Twitter were a huge piece of building all of these participatory networks between academics and educators. Anybody who wanted to open a blog about their thoughts about education or talk to people on Twitter, even relatively big scholars, like most of the keynote people that I met, I actually didn't meet them first in person. I met them first on Twitter. Digital scholarship this is more kind of my end of things, but I found that I cited people in my thesis that were talking about how academic blogging actually raised the visibility of people's like scholarly work, right? So for people who, if you were publishing a paper as a grad student, sometimes there's real value in like academic value, right? If you, are you mostly doing master's or PhD work? I see somebody say masters. Fabulous. If you want to get into a PhD, for instance, there sometimes you'll have people tell you, well, you might want to publish a paper. And certainly when you get into a PhD, if you choose to go that route, then there's a lot of kind of like, oh, you should publish a paper. Sometimes people spend months and months working on a paper, send it away for a year, get a bunch of reviews, and have to rewrite it. And then a year and a half later, when what they've originally wrote about is not necessarily as fresh as it once was, it gets published. And this is a bit depressing, but sometimes, like 6 people read it. Sometimes 60 people read it. Amazing, very best. Like, wow. But academic work does not necessarily have a huge audience. And my belief, as somebody who sometimes is lucky enough to get public funding for my academic research, believes that my research should be readable by the public. And so blogging about it and tweeting about it back in the day was a way for me to ensure that my work got seen and read, and not just for my own ego, but because if I'm gonna try to have ideas about something, I kind of wanted them to be shared. And so that was what I was doing with my PhD. And if people were putting stuff out in Twitter in that time, there was, if they were funny about it, if they engaged with other people and sort of showed that they were reading other people's work as well as putting their own stuff out there, they tended to be able to build a fairly engaged and active participatory account, right? You couldn't, I used to liken it to a party. You're not going to walk in and be like, I wrote a paper, please read it. It's about fish or whatever, because nobody, that's not social engagement. But if you're like, oh, you like fish, I also enjoy this, then you have a sense of each other as people in the room who like the same thing. And that's really what networks are, is just people who have some level of shared interest and vague recognition of each other riffing on stuff, talking about stuff, often very informally. And so Twitter was this very participatory hub for digital scholarship back in the day. And it was really not actually about tech. It was very much about culture and the culture of academia, as well as the culture of education. And it was kind of a place where it was fun to play. People could join from anywhere, because in this idea of the long tail of the internet was something that came out, I don't know, can't remember, pre 2010, sort of a Web 2.0 idea that no matter what you are interested in, there will be somebody out there who shares that interest. But if you, again, I grew up and lived for a long time in Prince Edward Island. If you live in a small place where you're the odd duck, you may not find those people, but the internet allowed many of us who had those kind of interests to find other people in that long tail of shared conversations. And it was fun, but most sort of 2015 was when I graduated with my PhD, and I was mid-career at that point. I'd been working in university for more than 15 years at that point. I went around talking about this stuff, and a lot of my colleagues, senior to me in age, but also maybe more serious people, were very like, I don't really know that I'm going to do this. Now, it turns out they were not wrong. That's the only part. because the web was changing. I loved early digital scholarship, and then the web kind of changed on me. There started to be examples. This is Stephen Saleta, who in 2014 was fired from a tenure track job that he had just accepted for tweeting about Gaza. This is 10 years ago. And he was sort of the first poster child for having donors essentially retract a tenure job offer. Then, with the first Trump election in the States, we saw a real after effect. I don't think it was talked about beforehand, but it became clear in the wake of that that there had been this massive amount of sharing of information by a company called Cambridge Analytica, who sold Facebook ads to people who were thought that they might be kind of vulnerable to misinformation and disinformation. And the company was broken down on purpose in 2018, but the act and the investment in that kind of practice did not go away. We saw increasing web polarization. We saw surveillance marketed to us at home. A lot of us probably have Alexas or Google Homes in our space, but it means that we literally do have a listening machine that is around us all the time. We also started to see around that time that a lot of like governmental agencies moved their work to digital first. So, for instance, my mom is a senior who is not very tech literate and doesn't have a cell phone because she really doesn't have very much money. And she didn't think it was worth it for her, but she needed to apply for a small government thing that would have given her a little bump to her pension, but she needed to do it online. And I lived here by then, and they were like, she went into the Service Canada organization, and they were like, well, just do it on your phone. And she's like, well, I don't have a phone. A lot of the services that we offer as a society are actually not available to the people who most need them when we make them digital first, right? There are consequences to displacing services to web-based tools. Part of it is that people may not be able to access them. Part of it is that web-based tools have the cultural biases of our society built into them, and so in some cases are discriminatory by race, class, gender, and those things have political and social and economic consequences. By about 2019, we started to learn that all of these apps that we had loaded onto our phones were extracting data from us and making a great deal of money on that data. In fact, data is often called the new oil, right? So, and most of us can't do very much about it. And that too is based in bias. The extraction work reinforces the cultural biases that we have. And so when we say, oh yes, we're going to track and surveil you all the time, but it'll help you, it'll minimize crime in your streets. For some of us, that may seem like an innocuous thing, but for folks, particularly who are racialized, they are often misidentified by these kinds of tools even now. And there was a period shortly after 2019, 2020, where a lot of the cities in the States and Canada, there were some municipal government limitations put on these tools, but then in the period of the pandemic, as focus moved elsewhere, they kind of all got brought kind of back in. And so we now kind of swim in a world where all of this is happening. And then the pandemic happened and we got more surveillance and more tracking etc. And then Elon Musk bought Twitter. So that exciting and unhappy little history is most of what I kind of wanted to share. I'm a digital educator. I'm a digital scholar. I used to love the participatory internet, and it's not as much fun anymore. And I was just curious about kind of how you folks are, um, whether those things are things that you're thinking about, um, and how you're dealing with them if you are thinking about them. I kind of wanted to open it up to you folks right now. Just what do you think we should do as educators, given that we have this very polluted space that is still, our students are on it, in different ways sometimes than we are. And even with Gen AI, which I left out of this entirely, but even though that is polluting the web further, that is still where they're getting their information. Thoughts? What do you think we should do? I'm using you as a focus group.
I am Miranda. I think that we can't do it alone because as educators already, especially in Saskatchewan, we just had a grueling strike and our classroom complexity is so high that we need ministry collaboration to address it. And there has to be some systemic change. As teachers, we can do as much as we can do in the classroom. And I think if you have the know-how and you understand the importance, you do it, because that's what we always do for our kids if we know how. But I would like to personally see some systemic change and directive to and resources to make it happen. So I guess I'm wishful. I'm wishing.
That makes sense, Miranda. What's your situation in Saskatchewan regarding like phone policies in school?
They just did a sweeping ban this summer. So that's the government saying cell phones are now banned in all schools, but we don't have, like, there's no actual reporting or compliance checks on that. And I think for a lot of teachers, there was a conversation and policies on that already happening in classrooms, but it's been a very big, like, we are the best stamp on the current party because they've done that. And then you can apply for exemptions to support instructional learning, which is again like something we were already doing already. So
yeah, we just got the same ban at the start of September, which was interesting because we'd actually had it banned in 2019 as well, but since everybody forgot about it or ignored it, they thought they'd ban it again, and maybe this time people would listen. I have an 11th grader myself, and I know at the start of the year, there was a little more kind of effort to, I think, pressure on teachers to try to enforce it, but that's largely waned as the year has worn on because, as Dean points out, it was largely a political move, and so there's no support for something like if you're just kind of being preached to do something, but it's not really relevant, then it's going to be hard to do. Where do you think that something like meaningful policy guidance could come from, right? Because this is the thing that I struggle with. And I don't have, when at PEI was a smaller province, it was actually easier to potentially have a voice at a government level occasionally. Here in Ontario, one, I don't live in anywhere near a center of power, and I'm still a kind of a relatively new person here, so I don't feel like I have a lot of access to the policy piece. But in terms of talking to educator audiences and stuff, I'm generally just kind of expressing the misgivings that I have and the reasons that I have them, while also I think Anna Christine is correct. We can't resist it completely, but are there things that we should be resisting? do you get any information about like tools that are recommended for use in schools versus not? Do you get any information that's pedagogical about data, that tools that you maybe are encouraged or that are known to be used, what the implications of that are for your students? Do you get any of that information? Guiding principles, not policies. Yep, to allow schools. And I think I like that actually. Do you get any guiding principles about things like data literacy in relation to classroom tools? Not so much. I see these are the places where I myself feel strongly that it's not fair to expect teachers to know about every tool or learn about every tool. And yet, if our students are going to be digitally literate at all, that now involves a fair amount of data literacy. And terms of service are not meant to be read, right? I did a project during the pandemic period with K to 12 and higher education teachers about different tools that we were being asked to teach on, but what we really knew about the terms of service policies. Okay, real talk. Has anybody read a whole terms of service policy ever? I don't have a prize for you, but I will clap. Even the lawyer, like I talked to a law professor, and they were like, I'm not even trained to read that. For the most part, this is by design. And the piece that my work has focused on in sort of laying out this is how we've been enclosed by platforms over the last decade or so, and what it means. It has real societal and political effects, but it is also something that systemically disempowers us as educators to be able to know enough to feel competent in using these tools. And that enclosure now with Gen AI is becoming so pervasive that I worry about it, because a lot of those sort of personalized tools are ultimately being sold to educational decision makers, not educators, but government level decision makers, as things that could replace a lot of the things that we do in the classroom. Most personalized claims are pretty flawed. But there is a disempowerment that is happening to all of us as educators professionally, because there's just so many tools and so much to keep track of, and it's always changing. And so that's why I'm just kind of curious about, like, how do you folks deal with this? Mostly just kind of head down focusing on your students?
I was actually I brought our Oculus home from school because I'm using VR stuff for my content catalyst. So I was using that to figure out some things. I was looking at some programs that might be helpful for our students. I was looking at this International Space Station program. There's one on dissecting a frog. So I was looking at some of these programs, and yeah, they had the terms and agreement stuff with it, and I wasn't reading all that. Scanned through it, I thought it, the kind of the video they share with you said looks good enough to me. It looks like it's fun. It looks like it was engaging. Scroll through, accept, and now I've got it downloaded on our menu. And I'm going to try it out with a couple of students to see if it's as user friendly. But yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, head down. I think it's going to be good, and let's just go for it. And that's probably not the best policy to or thing to decision making process, but it's the one I'm using right now.
I mean, that's fair, Jason. Thank you. Um, I think, I mean, but what you're doing is based in personal interest, right? Which is awesome. And that's one of the things that I think tech still can give us, is the chance to connect with other people, either who share those personal interests or who share the need for a community to help kind of drive some sort of resistance to just kind of being enclosed from above. So sharing the things that you're doing is really cool. Thank you. I'm just looking at the commentary that Alicia, I think, mentioned regarding there's a place for it, but we do this kind of collaborative PD every other week, which is a struggle. And yeah, that can just like time-wise, I'm assuming, is the struggle or finding the, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, no, mostly just because like I would say that our staff don't typically like outreach and like try to learn a lot of new things. They've been there for a really long time. They are really happy with where they are as an educator, and I think at times it's beneficial because they have that experiential learning that they can pass on, and I love that in cases. But in some cases it's nice to go and learn something new and updated and relatable to what we're going through in the classroom today, which they're struggling with as well. So it's kind of hard when we know that we're all craving that type of like new information. And I know that everyone needs it. So it's like, it's hard to not have that opportunity to go. And I know that I can, but I don't even know how much PD money that I specifically would have. Like, there's none of that's shared with us.
Oh, that's interesting. So that's not transparent at all either.
No, and our school is struggling financially right now, and so they basically just cut off everything extra. So, yeah, there's a lot of different things too.
Yeah. And I sympathize because I think that, I mean, this is partly why I'm, rather than telling you stuff, I'm kind of going like, hey, what are you doing? Because the thing that I've realized, particularly over the last few years, the grown-ups aren't coming, right? There isn't a right answer to this. If we value public education and if we value having agency as educators to guide our students in a very digital world, then one, yes, we absolutely do need to be, as Jenny said, open to new learning and change. But a lot of, we also need to be conscious of maybe where that learning is coming from. And I think that there's a lot of money to be made in education right now by technological infrastructure, and the interests of an ed tech venture capitalist and an educator may occasionally overlap, but they really aren't the same set of interests. And that piece is kind of part of the challenge that I think we all face right now. Yeah, particularly, I mean, the Elon Musk, I heard it referred to as the broligarchy. Um, but, but you know, there is a lot of interest in some tech corners to take all the power right now, and that is not certainly limited to education, but it also doesn't unfortunately leave education alone.
Well, and I would add to that the complexity of it because they all know I live in this world all the time, this whole Gen AI thing. So you have the big players, the Apples, the Microsofts, the Googles, Amazon, that people have typically, especially when it comes to education, you're a Microsoft shop or you're a Google shop for the most part, a few Apples, but mostly those two. Those two have not done a great job of continuing to support districts specifically with the AI stuff. So for example, I just posted in there, like Gemini is kind of a bit of a mess. It's not quite there. This is very expensive. They're asking $30 a person to upgrade to their, and no school can afford $30 a person. So there's an equity because they're giving it to some people and maybe not. They're trying to figure out what they can do. Then you have all these mom and pop shops. So the Magic Schools, the School AIs, all these people that are trying to get a piece of this pie. And even if there's a genuine desire, right? Like let's assume all the best intentions of these folks, they just want to provide you with a quality product.
Yep.
they still are they still are very watchful for the day that the Microsofts and or Googles come and just sort of squash them.
Mhm.
And so for a district to say what districts have done, we had Chris Kennedy on last week, and he said, listen, we don't have any horse in this race, but we want to give somebody tools that we can support, to your point, Bonnie. So we got Magic School for a year. We locked in our 3-year pricing, but we don't know, like, we don't care. Like at the end of that year, could be gone, and that's again another like kind of a bit of a punch in the gut to educators and everybody, like, hey, I just got going on this. Now we lost it, but that is what's there. Then the second part of this is that I don't know if do you know Gary Marcus?
Yeah, I know who he is.
So Gary is
From Twitter back in the day.
right, but Gary is very much like, hold on here. I see this. I think we're capped out. I don't think AI is going to get that much better in the near future, and that's going to take these markets down. Meanwhile, all these guys are out trying to get billions and billions of dollars to kind of keep this thing going.
Yeah.
OpenAI is not making any money. This is kind of where Twitter was,
Yeah.
10 years ago. So all of these sort of business things, which most of us as educators, we don't really care. We just want to teach kids. Unfortunately, does impact us in this way. So there's a lot of complexities in the space right now.
Yeah, it's the Gen AI piece just kind of takes all of those various trends that I was talking about that have been enclosing things and puts them on steroids. But as it's become possible to do all those things very quickly, we haven't been able to stop and ask, should we be doing this? Right. And what are the impacts of doing? And there's some great things that Gen AI can do. Like I'm not an entirely anti-Gen AI person, but if we are putting all of the money of education into Gen AI tools that could go bust next week, what happens to all that student data? That's a really important question because that's a whole other profit cycle for those businesses. And we are not, we're paying in some ways to have our students surveilled. But two, the whole question of, okay, so we've given all the money to this tech infrastructure, but are our students getting, special ed support? Are our students getting all of the other many supports that education systems are really tight on right now? We are almost kind of trading the 4 walls of the schoolhouse for this very expensive tech infrastructure that is a little bit of an emperor's new clothes, because while it can do real things, it cannot do all of the magical things that it's promising. And anyway, I know I don't have a whole lot more of your time. I will say that for me, something that's been kind of fun that I'm doing is I've gone back to a public educator space that is just building up and becoming interesting. Blue Sky has, since the American election, seen 20 million new users show up. There are beginning to be, and it is very much at this point, everything could change, your mileage may vary, but committed to being non-algorithmic, non-ads, user-based. And there are some really interesting communities developing over there, usually under the EduSky hashtag. I'll put it in the chat. And I'm finding that while some of it is overwhelming, you don't have to read it all by any, you never can. That's the truth of networks, right? You have to let go of I'm going to read it all mindset, but there are people over there talking about things that are probably interesting to you and about some of these questions. And I'm at least finding some will to be kind of interested in the idea that we who give a hoot about education could find ways to kind of band together and push back against some of these narratives as they become extreme within education. So that's the tension of what used to be participatory ed and what will it be in the future that I'm thinking about right now. I'll probably turn this back to you, Dean, and you gotta tie all those things together.
Well, again, I so appreciate the thinking that you you bring to these this conversation, and you make me go, yeah, I haven't thought about that. And all of it does, I guess, I've just come over the years to sort of love the complexity and the messiness of it. As much as you're always trying to kind of come up with you know, this sort of seminal quote and idea, which may sometimes you do, but most of the time it's like, yeah, it's complicated. There's a lot of stuff.
Yep.
And you kind of have to be comfortable, excuse me, in that space. And that's, I think it's a good thing in the sense that as humans, that's not our natural tendency, because we want to see the world in black and white, and this is good, this is bad. And yeah, there's things that we have to, you can't survive without some of that. But at the same time, there are these things that are just complex, and I mean, it's why we have these classes. It's why I have you come talk. It's like,
Yeah, I think they are complex, and I think that our students need to see us thinking about them out loud sometimes, right? Like we're trying to teach, you're trying to teach a whole lot of things, but it's okay. I think that we don't know. I think that letting students know that actually we're not sure what is good, and but that you are thinking about, I'm not sure about this tool. We can give it a try. Maybe let's try to read the terms of service together or not, but at least like let's acknowledge that they exist. All of those things build students' sense that we are all living in strange times and that they too can be part of having agency around the structures that are kind of enclosing around them. So I think that's something that teachers can do to foster real digital literacies in students, is just let them know what we don't know. And that honestly, anybody who tells them or tells you that they know probably doesn't know.
yeah, and I like that, just in the sense of, you know, kind of in the highly political world that we live in, there's a tendency to force people to decide, like pick a team, pick this thing, decide on this issue. And sure, certainly there are things that each of us are passionate about and believe
Yep.
strongly in our bones. Awesome. But there's so many things that we go like, yeah, but I don't know about that one. So to your point, Bonnie, about modeling this with our students, saying like, there's just a lot of things that you get to question about, and you get to pause and say, let me think about this for a while.
Yep.
Let me ask some other people. Let me not jump to this is great. So I love it when I'm challenged, even on the things that I'm really passionate about and feel strongly about. Someone says, well, yeah, but what about this? And then I go, oh yeah, because I love that. I get enthusiastic and I want people to get excited about certain things, but I also need others to say, well, you haven't thought about that. And I'm okay with that. I like that, because that helps me be better, I think.
Yeah, I do too. All right. Thank you for your time.
Thanks,
Thank you very much for your contributions. It was really kind of great to realize where you're at and think about that. So appreciate it. Dean, have a great night. Take care.
Thanks. Thanks, Bonnie.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Well, as soon as I figure out where the leave button is, there it is.
The awkward
Bye.
leaving time. Bye. All right. Well, lots of good stuff there. Again, I'm always challenged by her thinking, and I like, again, almost, you think about, you know, some of the people that we've had in, whether it was Andrew McLuhan, even Jennifer last week, have this somewhat historical context to bring to light, to here we are today, and this is how we got here, and that's an important part of this of everything that we do here. Let's take a break. So we will take let's do 7 minutes to the bottom of the hour. Then Dustin, you're up to bat, and you can take whatever you want of that last half an hour. So all right, be back in a few minutes.
Hey, Dustin, or I don't know if anyone else has had this problem. I was not able to access your video. It says it's private still.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I just changed it. Somebody
Okay, perfect. Thank
I
you.
just changed it. Sorry about that.
No, it's
Jenny
all-
told me that it wasn't.
All right, Dustin, whenever you want to launch, go ahead.
Okay. Very nice. Wait a second here. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? I hope. Yeah. All right. One sec. Did. I'm just gonna share a Menti link in the chat, which will be useful for this little presentation part here. All right, so having the same topic as before, and trying to find a way to deal with it uniquely. I found it this was a challenging one for me on like where to go. I thought about it maybe too hard in too many different ways. So we'll see how this goes. So thinking about lifelong learning and digital literacy. So in the chat, I shared a little kind of some questions that I'm going to use in the presentation. So while you're kind of looking through that, one of the links that or one of the articles I shared, kind of as the bonus one, had some interesting viewpoints on this idea of like a learning society. And so I pulled some of this information off from there. A place, Global Age Watch, looking at the number of people that are going to be 80 and over 70 years from now, so 2100, will almost be 1 billion people at that age. And putting that like in perspective, just thinking about how people's careers have grown longer, governmental policy changes on like retirement, those kind of things. So coming up soon, 10,000 baby boomers will be turning 65 every day. How many jobs they'll have, experiencing different jobs throughout their lives. And that idea of, as it says, 87% of employees acknowledging they need new skills. So having to kind of retrain, retool, and how that looks in different careers and different jobs. So in that Menti, I basically have these 3 questions that I want you to kind of on your own kind of answer, and then we're going to kind of look at it together and then have some breakout discussions. So the first one I thought about was flexibility. So how do we foster this in our classrooms? Excuse me. Also, there's a few Easter eggs in these little slides that I pulled out from blogs and from our guest speaker tonight. So they might be hard to find, but maybe you'll find them. So thinking about flexibility, how do we foster that idea of being a flexible learner in our classrooms? The second question, motivation. How do we ensure motivation in our students' learning? It's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek motivation poster, but how can we keep them motivated in the tasks that we do? And some of that came from our previous presentation. So maybe you can think about that way. And the final one, specifically looking at digital literacy, how can we provide authentic opportunity for developing digital literacy skills and awareness? So just take some time, look at those questions on the Menti. And I'm gonna pull up the results. Where did that go? There we go. Just checking, can everybody see the results when I pull it up on the screen? Was that showing for everybody? Or no, there we go. Really? Okay, so now it's updated. I was just going to kind of highlight. So flexibility, fostering flexibility in our classroom. So learning from mistakes, providing choice. That's always a good one that comes up a few times. Thinking about like how you can be loosely linked to curriculum. It doesn't have to be so tight, especially in those elementary years when you don't write a test at the end or anything like that. Letting students approach their work what's best for them, trying to create a culture, learning new things. So culture, that idea of the culture in your classroom, the process over the product, some good answers. And then looking at motivation. I think I just got to refresh this one second. There we go. AI, VR, promoting the lifelong learning. We'll see what that can look like as we continue talking. Things are interesting, so interest to them. That motivation, the external only gets them so far. A little bit of self-awareness, finding out who they are. Intentional instructions, intentional design, rewards, timers, STEM. And then in the last one, thinking about authenticity. The resources like Common Sense Media, excuse me, growing their skills, keeping current, airing concerns, so like being open to what they might experience as concerns, real life connections, ensuring teachers are fully informed, showing maybe what not to do, and then that kind of stuff. All right. So continuing on. There we go. So in our first little breakout rooms, I want you to think about this question, and I'll post it in the chat. Thinking about digital literacy and lifelong learning, what do you see and what would you hear if you were looking in a classroom that is promoting that lifelong learning through digital literacy skills? So I'm gonna go to this. Sharing screen. And very good. All right.
So Dustin, when you're want them to come back, you just click the close room things and then they got 60 seconds. They'll get another 60 seconds.
Is that under breakout room?
On the breakout where you see all the rooms there?
Okay, so it says close all rooms. Okay,
Yeah,
I
that
see it now.
sort of 1 minute warning.
Okay. Thanks. Is there an easy way to jump? Oh, I can just join a room. I see it here right now. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I think we're all back. So thinking about like what you're seeing and what you're hearing, is there anybody that would like to share something that came out of their breakup room discussion?
I can share what I said. Basically that if I look at my classroom, as it stands right now, it's full tech. I don't even think that I would want my classroom to look like that, feel like that. If I was to, if I had a choice, just because I think there's still benefits to paper pen. There's still benefits to editing an essay on paper versus on the computer and spell check and all of that stuff that we, kids don't know how to do on paper. But just like still the equity issue, like I said before, my class is all tech, right? So even we're still having inequity issues with kids being asked to get a touch computer and them not bringing a stylus or getting a stylus and then they have to write with their finger and it's like it's still not equal even though everyone has a computer, right? So there's a lot to that.
Thanks, Lucia. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share from their discussion?
We had a good discussion about balance. I think that was a key component of our conversation. Just a lot of the initiatives and the new changes are all important, and finding the time and ways and expertise to integrate them is can be a challenge. We talked a bit about the learning process and metacognitive pieces. Yeah, it was a good conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Miranda. So just kind of taking it, I'm actually not going to do a breakout room because it just kind of builds on what you did in your breakout room. So I just posted in the chat. So the first way it was kind of like you're looking into a classroom. It may not have been yours, it may have been anybody's, but this time you're the teacher. So what's that like one thing that you would do as the teacher to have that positive impact on your students, to give them the authentic learning, or to connect in a way that makes them want to be a lifelong learner and stay connected to digital literacy and that kind of thing. So maybe something came out from your room already, or in some ways it kind of already shared, but if there was one thing that you were thinking about, what would it be? Or a couple things?
For me, and if I were to go back to the classroom, I was thinking about digital storytelling is one thing that we've learned from this class, maybe not necessarily this week, that I would definitely be using with my kids a lot more.
Yeah, digital storytelling it's an interesting one. Yeah. Looking at the chat, like understanding the apps that they're using. So yeah, I could see that. That's a good idea, Lisa. Brave, making mistakes. That's a good. Simulations, fun idea. Relationships. Yeah.
I think of
That
that.
was something. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just thinking of that. I don't know where it was presented, but that quote: "Always present characteristic of being a professional, being open to new learning and change." Just sharing with my students, like I was talking to our group. In the last few weeks, I got a Chat GPT account, an OpenIA account, HeyGen app, adding stuff to our Oculus account, all these different things that, at the beginning of this class, I had no idea about. Just being open to these new things and experimenting and trying them out and going out of your comfort zone and sharing that and talking to your students about that it's okay to make mistakes, but get out there, try new things. You're be pleasantly surprised at times by some of the things you go out on a limb for.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah.
Well, Jason, I think it highlights a generation who has become fearful of so many of living that kind of way, that of taking chances and risks, and for whatever reason. I mean, there's a myriad of reasons why that is, but I would probably concur with your argument that kids don't like taking chances. They don't like failing. They don't like what that feels like, and they don't like trying things, and they need to be able to, be in spaces where you can do that, where you can mess up and it's fine, right? It's fine. It's creating an environment where they can, and I mean, for goodness sakes, this is the time of their life where, messing up in these kind of spaces with these tools is far less consequential than when you're, doing something in your 20s or 30s that have, definitely more severe consequences. So that's what I think about, is how do we create opportunities for kids to learn and live and fail and wonder. And right now they're doing it in private because we're not as explicit about it. And that's where it's more problematic for sure.
I think this goes back to our little kids too, that we're so rushed now, and there's so many more things that we're trying to do that maybe weren't important before, and parents are taking care of things that they've never taken care of before. Our parents didn't put our boots on for us, and we see it happening all day, every day at school. And then that just has a ripple effect of being afraid to fail because we're not doing things for ourselves that are hard.
Yeah, I like Jenny's idea of making, kids feel special, connecting that way. As Bonnie was presenting, it kind of I made a connection to what my topic was. I don't know. Oh yeah. I started to think about the idea of how fast technology is changing, and that idea of kids feeling that failure, or maybe that burnout of we learned this, now we're learning this, and now we've picked up another app, or we've picked up another program that we're going to do in class, and they're just learning so many different programs that they just maybe burn themselves out of it. And then so it was just that idea of trying to find those consistent things that will stay there, but it's harder and harder because everything just keeps changing. Like that freemium model that is so common now in education, where it starts free and then you have to pay for it, and then you stop doing it, and then you're just. And I think the kids are starting to feel that way too. Like I feel as a teacher sometimes that I'm just I've tried too many things and I don't even know what I want to do. So that's just kind of where I'm going to wrap it up. So I appreciate everybody participating and listening to me ramble. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Andrea, for today. That was awesome. Another good class, and yeah, we'll get a couple more weeks to go. So next week we have, I think we're wrapping up our content catalyst. We have Hanfet, Ayodel, and Jason are putting a bow on that portion of it. Thanks for everybody for all your contributions. Yeah. So with all that, happy winter. It's here, I guess. We're dealing with it now. It's what I'm coming to know. I already asked if anybody's shoveling at our house, and it was like, what's the point? It's still coming down like crazy, so why would we bother? So I guess that's what's happening. Anyway, thank you all. Have a great night. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.